Welcome to another deep dive, into the mind of Ayn Rand.
Ooh,
We're
fun.
going to be exploring, the core idea from her philosophy, the sacredness of the human mind. And you shared a really powerful excerpt with me.
Yeah.
It's it's a concept that touches on individualism, creativity,
Yeah.
and even the way societies thrive or don't.
It really is.
Right.
It's fascinating how this idea is really like the foundation for so much of Rand's work.
Right. It's not just like some abstract philosophical notion.
Yeah.
So let's start with, why Rand placed such importance on the human mind.
Okay.
What made it sacred in her view?
Well, for Rand, the mind wasn't just about intelligence.
Oh.
It was the very essence of what makes us human and what sets us apart in the world.
Uh,
It was our ultimate tool for survival, not necessarily in a physical sense,
okay.
but in our ability to navigate and shape reality.
Interesting.
Unlike animals who are driven by instinct,
Yeah.
we as humans use our minds to solve problems, to innovate, and literally build the world that we live in.
So would she say we're in a constant state of survival of the fittest minds?
She might push back on that phrase a bit, actually.
Okay.
Well, she definitely saw the mind as our key to thriving Rand. Emphasized reason and choice, not just raw intelligence.
Okay.
She'd probably argue that things like willpower and moral character are just as important as intellect when it comes to navigating the world successfully.
That's an interesting distinction.
Yeah.
So it's not just about being smart,
Right.
but about applying our intelligence in a purposeful,
Yeah.
principled way.
Exactly.
Okay.
The excerpt uses the example of a farmer.
Ah.
They don't just passively hope for crops, right?
Right.
They use knowledge of the soil, of seasons and techniques.
Yeah.
Their mind is constantly at work making choices to ensure their livelihood.
I see. I see.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's such a traditional example.
Right.
How does this idea of the mind as our primary tool apply to today's world?
Well, think about, the skills that are valued today.
Hi.
App developers writing code, social media strategists crafting campaigns, content creators capturing attention. All of these things,
Okay.
they're all relying on their minds to not just exist, but to thrive in a complex digital environment.
Right.
It's a different landscape than farming, but the core principle is the same.
Yeah.
Our minds are the tools that we use to shape our reality
Okay.
and achieve our goals.
So we've got the mind as this essential tool for survival,
Right?
but the excerpt also highlights Rand's strong stance on individual thought.
Yeah.
What's the connection there?
Well, for Rand, true thinking can't be forced.
Right.
It can only be chosen.
Interesting.
Any attempt to coerce the mind, whether through government control or social pressure,
Right.
was seen as a violation of its sacredness.
I see.
So this ties directly into her fierce advocacy for individual liberty.
So no thought police allowed.
Exactly.
But wouldn't she acknowledge that there are times when collective action is necessary, even
Yeah.
if it means some level of conformity?
That's where it gets a little complex.
Right.
While Rand, champion individual, thought she wasn't advocating for anarchy.
Okay.
She did believe in shared values and cooperation within a free society. But the key was that this cooperation had to stem from individual choice,
Gotcha.
not coercion.
Okay.
It's about finding that balance, respecting individual freedom, while recognizing the need for a framework
Right.
that allows society to function.
Sounds like a delicate balancing act.
It is.
But this all kind of circles back to the idea that for Rand, respecting the mind
Yes.
also means respecting individual choice.
Absolutely. And that leads us to another crucial aspect of her philosophy,
Right.
the role of rationality.
So is she saying we should all be emotionless robots just crunching logic all the time?
Not quite.
Okay.
Rand wasn't advocating for suppressing emotions. She acknowledged their existence,
Right.
but she firmly believed that emotions should be guided by reason.
Okay.
It's about understanding the world based on evidence, avoiding contradictions in our thinking,
Yeah.
and making choices that align with reality.
So it's not about ignoring our feelings,
Right.
but about grounding them in a rational framework.
Precisely, and the excerpt actually lays out 3 core components
Okay.
to this idea of rationality.
Right. I'm listening.
First, you have to actively seek truth
Yeah.
based on evidence,
Uh-huh.
not just on what you want to believe.
So it's about challenging assumptions, not just blindly accepting what we're told.
Right.
Okay.
Second, Rand emphasized avoiding contradictions in our thinking.
Yeah.
Our beliefs should form a cohesive, logical structure.
Okay.
not a jumbled mess of conflicting ideas.
That makes sense. It's about having a consistent,
Yeah,
reasoned worldview.
right.
Okay, what's the third component?
Perhaps the most important one, acting in accordance with your rational understanding of the world.
Okay.
So it's not enough to just talk the talk.
Right.
You have to walk the walk.
So it's about aligning our actions
Yeah.
with our rational beliefs. It's about integrity.
Exactly. And that ties beautifully into how Rand viewed the act of creation.
Okay.
It wasn't just about practicality,
Yeah.
but about expressing the power of a rational mind in a meaningful way.
So we're not just talking about building houses or inventing gadgets.
Right.
It's deeper than that.
Right. Think about the characters in her novels.
Okay.
Howard Rourke, the architect in The Fountainhead.
Uh-huh.
He sees his work as an expression of his individual vision.
Okay.
You know, a way to bring something beautiful and unique into the world through a rational process.
And what about John Galt, the enigmatic figure in Atlas Shrugged?
He's another powerful example.
Okay.
You know, he's a brilliant inventor,
Mhm.
but he's also a symbol of the mind's potential
Right.
to create and to resist being exploited by those who don't value reason.
So she saw creation as this almost spiritual act, a reflection of the mind's power and potential,
Yes.
when guided by reason. But does this apply to all forms of creation?
Mm-hmm.
What if someone's passion isn't architecture or engineering, but something like, say, baking incredible cakes?
Mm-hmm.
Would Rand consider that a sacred act of creation, too?
That's a question that gets to the heart of what Rand valued.
Yeah.
I think she'd say it's less about the specific activity and more about the intention and spirit behind it.
Okay.
You know, are you approaching your work with a sense of purpose? A desire to excel, to create something truly excellent,
Right.
using your mind's full potential?
Yeah.
If so, then yes, even a cake can be a testament to the power of the human mind.
It's about bringing your full intellect and passion to bear,
Yes.
no matter what you're creating.
Precisely. It's about recognizing the inherent value and dignity
Okay.
of the creative process itself, guided by reason and fueled by individual passion.
That's a perspective that really makes you rethink what it means to create and contribute to the world.
It does.
And it connects directly to another key aspect of Rand's philosophy.
Yes.
The idea of respecting the mind.
Right.
All right, let's unpack that. What did she mean by respecting the mind, both in ourselves and in others?
Well, for Rand, it had several layers.
Okay.
First and foremost, it meant valuing rational thought in yourself and in everyone else.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that each person possesses this capacity for reason, for
Right.
making their own choices based on their own judgment.
So it's about treating people as individuals,
Yes.
capable of thinking for themselves, not as pawns to be manipulated or controlled.
Exactly. And this ties into the second layer.
Okay.
Protecting intellectual freedom,
Oh.
allowing people to think and express themselves
Uh,
without fear of censorship or coercion.
so no thought police in any form.
Exactly. Well, Rand also believed that respecting the mind means judging people based on their character and intellect,
Okay.
not on superficial things like their wealth or social status.
Right.
It's about recognizing the inherent worth of each individual
Yeah.
based on their ability to think, to reason,
Right.
to contribute to the world through their own unique talents.
So it's like saying, hey, your ideas and your ability to think are what truly matter, not the car you drive or the clothes you wear.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this leads to some pretty profound moral implications, which is what we'll delve into next.
All right, I'm ready to dive deeper into that. Let's see where this idea of respecting the mind takes us next.
Yeah, let's go. So before the break, we were talking about how Rand saw judging people based on superficial things as a sign of disrespect.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in appearances,
Right.
or social status.
Yeah.
But she challenges us to look deeper, to recognize the value of someone's mind and their ability to reason.
And for Rand, this had direct moral implications.
Okay.
You know, exploiting or deceiving someone was
Right.
seen as a major transgression
Why is that?
because it disrespects their capacity to make rational choices.
Okay.
It's treating them as a means to an end rather than an autonomous individual.
So things like manipulation or taking advantage of someone's ignorance would be big no-nos for her?
Absolutely. It goes against the very principle of honoring the mind's capacity for reason.
Okay.
You know, it's
Yeah.
essentially saying your ability to think for yourself isn't worthy of my respect.
Right.
And for Rand, that was a serious ethical breach.
It's interesting because, in a way, it also connects back to what we were saying earlier about respecting our own minds.
Yeah.
It's like if I'm engaging in dishonest behavior or manipulating others,
Right.
I'm not just disrespecting them, I'm also undermining my own integrity.
That's a really insightful connection, and it leads us to that concept of integrity,
Okay.
which is central to Rand's philosophy.
Right.
She defined it as aligning your actions with your rational beliefs,
Uh-huh.
being true to yourself,
Oh.
to the judgments your mind has made.
So it's not just about being honest in a general sense, but about living in accordance with your own reason.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that your capacity for rational thought is sacred.
Yeah.
And because of that, your actions should reflect the judgments you've made using that powerful tool.
Hearing that makes me think about all those times I've done things I knew deep down weren't quite right.
Yeah.
Even if they were the easier or more convenient path,
Right.
it's like I was betraying my own mind in those moments,
Yeah.
going against what my reason was telling me.
I think that's something we can all relate to on some level.
Yeah.
And it highlights how Rand's ideas, while often debated on a philosophical level,
Uh-huh.
can actually be quite applicable to our everyday lives.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from the mind as our survival tool to the importance of individual thought rationality and this concept of integrity.
Right.
But I'm curious about how all of this plays out on a larger scale.
Okay.
What did Rand believe about the relationship between the sacred mind and society as a whole?
It was a crucial connection for her.
Okay.
Rand believed that societies flourish when they honor the mind,
Okay.
meaning they encourage education,
Right.
innovation,
Uh-huh.
open debate, and the free exchange of ideas.
So all those principles we've been talking about, on an individual level, scaled up to a societal level.
Precisely. They create an environment where individuals are empowered to use their minds to their fullest potential,
Right.
leading to progress and innovation.
So societies that embrace reason, individual thought, and the power of creation
Yes.
tend to thrive.
Precisely. She also emphasized protecting intellectual property rights,
Okay.
recognizing the value of creations that originate from the human mind, and of course, upholding laws that protect individual rights.
Right.
That's crucial. It ensures the freedom for people to think and act in accordance with their own reason.
It sounds like a recipe for a pretty incredible society, one that values individual freedom, reason, and creativity.
It does.
But what happens on the flip side?
Right.
What about societies that suppress thought, that don't value the mind? What did Rand believe about their fate?
She was pretty clear about that she saw those societies as destined to stagnate and ultimately collapse.
Wow.
They might have short-term success, but in the long run, they can't sustain themselves.
Why is that?
Because they're going against the very nature of what it means to be human.
Okay.
Our capacity to think, to reason, to create.
And are there historical examples that support this view?
Oh, absolutely. We can look throughout history and see how regimes that attempt to control thought and stifle dissent ultimately fail.
Yeah.
They might have initial power, but they can't hold back the human desire for freedom and self-expression forever.
Wow.
It's like trying to dam a river. Eventually, the water will find a way to break through.
That's a powerful analogy.
It is.
Makes you wonder if we're seeing any of those dam-breaking moments happening in the world today. Are there forces at play that are trying to suppress thought or control the narrative even in subtle ways?
It's a question we each need to grapple with.
Yeah.
We're living in a world with rapid technological advancements and ever-shifting cultural norms.
Right.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by information overload and competing voices vying for our attention.
It feels like everyone's afraid to voice an opinion that goes against the grain for fear of being canceled or ostracized.
Exactly. And that kind of self-censorship can be incredibly damaging,
Yeah.
both to individuals and to society as a whole.
Right.
It creates an environment where critical thinking is stifled, where conformity is valued over independent thought,
Right.
and where true progress becomes nearly impossible.
So this idea of the sacred mind isn't just some abstract philosophy tucked away in a textbook.
No, it's not.
It has direct implications for how we navigate the world today, both as individuals and as members of a society.
Absolutely. It's a call to recognize the incredible power and potential of our minds, both individually and collectively. And it challenges us to be vigilant in protecting that power from forces that seek to diminish or control it.
It's about recognizing that our minds are the source of our freedom,
Yes.
our creativity, and our ability to shape the world around us.
Precisely. And speaking of shaping the world, Rand believed that the sacredness of the mind was inextricably linked to our sense of self-worth, our dignity as human beings.
That's an interesting connection.
Yeah.
How did she see those two ideas relating to each other?
Well, for Rand, the very foundation of human dignity was the sacredness of the mind.
Okay.
It's what separates us from animals, what makes us unique and valuable.
Uh-huh.
It's not just about being smart or successful,
Right.
but about recognizing the inherent worth of our ability to think, to reason, to make choices based on our own judgment.
So to honor your mind is to honor yourself.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing your own intrinsic value as a thinking being.
To cultivate your reason, to strive for knowledge, to create something new.
Yeah.
These are all acts of self-respect, of recognizing your own inherent dignity.
Okay, that's powerful.
It is.
But what about the flip side? What are the things that, in her view, dishonor the mind and diminish our sense of self-worth?
Rand identified several things that she believed undermined our capacity for rational thought, and therefore our dignity. Things like laziness,
Right.
dishonesty,
Yeah.
evading reality,
Huh.
blindly following dogma.
Okay.
Essentially anything that abdicates the responsibility of using our minds to their fullest potential.
So it's like we're betraying ourselves,
Yeah.
diminishing our own humanity when we give in to those tendencies.
That was her view. She believed we have a moral obligation to ourselves,
Right.
to our own dignity as thinking beings, to cultivate our minds and live a life guided by reason.
I'm starting to see how this all connects back to the core idea of the sacred mind.
Yes.
It's not just about abstract philosophy. It's about how we live our lives,
Yeah.
how we treat ourselves and others.
Right, and it reinforces what we discussed earlier about respecting the minds of others. If we genuinely believe in the inherent value of the mind, we can't exploit or manipulate others.
Right.
Doing so violates their dignity and diminishes our own in the process.
It makes me think about all the times I've done things on autopilot without really thinking them through. Scrolling through social media for hours, accepting what I see on the news without questioning it.
Right.
It's like I wasn't giving my own mind the respect it deserves.
That's an honest observation, and one that resonates with many people in our fast-paced, information-saturated world. You know, it's easy to fall into patterns that don't serve us, but the good news is that we have the power to change, that
Right.
we can choose to engage with the world more consciously and cultivate our own rationality.
So what are some practical steps our listeners can take to start honoring their own minds more? What would Ayn Rand suggest?
Based on her philosophy, I'd say a good starting point is cultivating a habit of questioning.
Okay.
You know, don't just accept things at face value. Dig deeper, seek evidence, consider different perspectives.
Be more like a detective, always looking for clues and piecing together the truth for yourself.
Exactly. Another thing Rand emphasized was the importance of defining your values.
Okay.
What do you believe in? What principles guide your life? Once you have a clear understanding of your own values, you can start making choices that align with them.
Right.
Choices that reflect your own reasoned judgment.
It's like having a compass to guide your decisions.
Yes.
To make sure you're staying true to yourself. What else?
She also talked about the importance of productive work.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be some grand world-changing endeavor.
Right.
It's about finding something you're passionate about that uses your skills and talents
I think.
and that contributes to the world in a way that's meaningful to you.
So it could be anything from writing a novel to starting a business to volunteering in your community.
Yeah.
As long as it's something that you find fulfilling and that allows you to use your mind in a positive and productive way.
Precisely. And finally, I'd add that it's important to surround yourself with people who also value the mind.
Okay.
People who challenge you to think critically,
Wow.
who inspire you to learn and grow.
There's that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Right.
If you're constantly around people who are disengaged or intellectually lazy, it's going to rub off on you.
Exactly. Choose your company wisely. Your intellectual and personal growth depend on it.
Okay, so we've talked about how to honor our own minds,
Right.
but Ayn Rand also wrote about forces that clash with this idea of the sacred mind.
Yes, she did.
What were some of those forces and where do we see them playing out in the real world?
One major force she identified was collectivism.
Okay.
The idea that the group is more important than the individual.
Uh-huh.
She saw this as a threat to individual thought
How so?
because it demands conformity and often suppresses dissenting voices.
So anyone who dares to think differently or challenge the prevailing groupthink is seen as a threat.
That's right. She saw this play out in totalitarian regimes where individuals are expected to sacrifice their own thoughts and values for the supposed good of the state. But it's not just limited to those extreme examples.
Are there more subtle forms of collectivism that we encounter in our everyday lives?
Absolutely. Think about the social pressure to conform, whether it's in fashion politics or even how we express ourselves online.
Right.
There's this constant pressure to fit in,
Yeah.
to not rock the boat,
Yeah.
which can be incredibly stifling to independent thought.
It's like everyone's walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing and face backlash.
Exactly. And that fear can lead to self-censorship,
Yeah.
where people are afraid to even think certain thoughts, let alone express them.
That's a pretty chilling thought.
It is.
What other forces did Rand see as a threat to this sacred mind?
Another was what she called altruism.
Okay.
But it's not exactly what we typically think of as altruism.
Wait, so being kind to others is bad?
No.
That doesn't sound like Ayn Rand.
It's a bit more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
She wasn't against helping others,
Right.
but she believed that it should always be a matter of choice, not a moral obligation or duty.
Okay.
She saw this idea of self-sacrifice, putting others' needs before your own rational judgment as a form of self-abnegation,
Right.
a denial of your own mind's value.
So it's not about rejecting kindness or generosity,
Right.
but about making sure that those actions are driven by our own free will
Yes.
and rational judgment, not by a sense of obligation or guilt.
Precisely, it's about recognizing that we have a responsibility to ourselves,
Okay.
to our own well-being and our own values as well as to others.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
What else was on Rand's list of threats to the sacred mind?
She also cautioned against what she called mysticism,
Okay.
which she defined as relying on faith or emotions rather than reason.
So basically anything that goes against logic and evidence-based thinking.
Yes, she saw this as a way of evading reality,
Uh-huh.
of avoiding the responsibility of thinking for yourself and making judgments based on reason.
I can see how that could be tempting, especially in a world that's often confusing and unpredictable.
Right.
But she's saying that we have to face reality head-on,
Yes.
even when it's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and use our minds to understand it.
Exactly. It's about embracing the power of our minds
Yeah.
to navigate the world, to make sense of it, even when it's challenging.
All right, so we've got collectivism, this particular view of altruism and mysticism.
Right.
Are there any other forces that Rand saw as a threat to the sacred mind?
Well, she also wrote extensively about the dangers of what she called looters,
Okay.
people who exploit the productive minds of others for their own gain.
That sounds pretty villainous. Give me an example.
Think about Ellsworth Toohey, the antagonist in The Fountainhead.
Yeah.
He's a critic who manipulates people, preys on their insecurities, and undermines their self-esteem. He essentially tries to control them by attacking their minds,
Okay.
their ability to think for themselves and trust their own judgment.
That's a pretty chilling character, and I bet we see versions of Toohey in the real world, too.
Oh, absolutely. Think about manipulative bosses controlling partners, even some social media influencers who try to exploit their followers for their own personal gain.
Right.
They're all engaging in a form of looting, trying to hijack people's minds and make them doubt themselves.
It's a reminder that we need to be vigilant in protecting our own minds
Yes,
and recognizing when others might be trying to manipulate or exploit us.
exactly. It's about being aware of those forces that are trying to undermine our own thinking
Right.
and the thinking of those around us.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Mm.
We've talked about the importance of honoring our own minds, the forces that threaten the sacredness of a mind,
Right.
and how these ideas play out in both Ayn Rand's novels and in the real world.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, where do we go from here? What practical takeaways can our listeners apply to their own lives based on all of this?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of why we're doing this deep dive.
Yeah.
It's not just about exploring Ayn Rand's ideas in a vacuum.
Right.
It's about seeing how they can inform our own lives, how they can help us to live more consciously and intentionally.
So it's not just about thinking about thinking. It's about putting these ideas into action.
Exactly. And the excerpt you provided actually gives us some great starting points.
Okay.
Remember those steps we discussed earlier about honoring your own mind, cultivating a habit of questioning, defining your values,
Right.
engaging in productive work, and surrounding yourself with people who also value the mind?
Yeah.
Those are all practical steps we can take to live in a way that honors our own sacred mind.
Right. It's about making choices that reflect our own reasoned judgment
Yes.
and using our minds to create and contribute to the world in a way that's meaningful to us.
And I would add to that the importance of being courageous in your thinking.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo,
Uh-huh.
to speak up for what you believe in, even if it's unpopular.
So be like Howard Rourke, standing up for your vision,
Yes.
even when the world tells you you're wrong.
Yes, and be like John Galt, refusing to let others exploit your mind or your talents.
It's about owning the power of our minds.
Yeah.
And using that power to create, to contribute, and to live a life that's true to ourselves.
Beautifully said. It all starts with recognizing the power
Yeah.
and the sacredness of our own minds.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation.
It has.
I feel like I'm walking away with a much deeper understanding of Ayn Rand's philosophy and how it can be applied to my own life.
I'm glad to hear that.
And I think that's a great point to transition to the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
where we'll explore some of the broader implications of these ideas and what they mean for both individuals and society as a whole. Welcome back to our deep dive, into Ayn Rand and her view on the sacredness of the human mind.
It really is a fascinating concept.
We've been talking for a while now.
Yeah.
We've explored so much, like from the very, basic individual level of how we use our minds as tools to survive and to create like the larger implications for society as a whole, like what happens when societies value reason and individual thought.
And I think as we wrap up, it's worth taking a moment to reflect on why this idea of the sacred mind resonates so strongly with people.
Yeah, why is that?
Even those who might not fully agree with all of Rand's other ideas.
Right, exactly. She can be a bit controversial.
She definitely can be.
Yeah.
But there's something about this concept that seems to, tap into something fundamental about being human.
Totally. It's like this deep desire we have to understand the world, to make our own choices, and to use our minds to create something that matters, something meaningful with our lives.
Absolutely. And Rand was really emphasizing the power and the potential that we all have within us, in our own minds.
Right.
It's a really empowering message, especially in a world that often tries to tell us who to be and what to think.
She's like, forge your own path.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She was all about reclaiming that individual agency, that power to shape your own life and contribute to the world in your own unique way.
Earlier, you mentioned something that kind of stuck with me.
Yep.
You said that, like, undervaluing our own minds or the minds of others could actually have some pretty far-reaching consequences.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that a bit?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
If we don't value our own minds, if we're not actively cultivating our ability to reason, to make choices based on our own judgment, then we become much more susceptible to manipulation, to exploitation.
We're giving our power away.
Exactly. We end up living lives that don't really reflect our true potential.
And what about, the flip side? What happens when we don't respect the minds of other people?
Well, that's when we start to see real problems in society as a whole.
Okay.
When we try to control what others think, when we devalue their contributions, we create this environment where conformity becomes the norm. Critical thinking is stifled, and innovation just withers away.
It's like we're creating a world of robots.
It's a scary thought, and it's a stark reminder that our choices really do matter, not just for ourselves, but for the world we create together.
Right.
If we want a world where the mind is valued, where creativity thrives, where people are free to be themselves and reach their full potential, then we have to start by living those principles in our own lives.
So it's a call to action.
Absolutely.
To be more aware, to be intentional.
Yes.
And to really champion the power of the mind in everything we do.
Well said. I think that's the perfect note to end on.
This has been such a great conversation. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on Ayn Rand and her ideas.
I'm glad to hear that.
And, we've only scratched the surface here. There's so much more to explore in her work. But hopefully this deep dive is giving you some new ideas to think about.
It's always good to challenge our own assumptions.
And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas. Dig deeper into Ayn Rand's writing, or maybe even check out other philosophers who've tackled these big questions about human nature and free will and the power of the mind.
Keep those minds engaged. Stay curious and never stop questioning.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.